Okay, I think we are ready. We have a lot of friends dialing in for this webinar. So in fact, all over the world, so I have to say good morning and good afternoon to everyone. So today, we are very honored to have three very experienced industry practitioners to share their view on a very trendy topic, that's digital currency and payment methods. So without much ado, let me invite our speakers to briefly introduce themselves to all of us before I start a very long list of questions. Yeah, okay, maybe I'll invite Angelina first, followed by Dorothy and then Michael.
Thank you, King. And esteemed fellow panelists, Dorothy and Michael, it's very nice to meet you both. My name is Angelina Kwan, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer, the Group Chief Operating Officer and Group Risk Officer for HashKey. HashKey is an integrated financial services group that is currently, we are licensed by the FSDC already, and we are currently on the road to applying for the Virtual Asset Service Providers license. So we hope to be the second in Hong Kong to actually get that license. I got interested in digital assets in 2013 when I first was given my first 5 Bitcoin. I've never sold them since. I have since at the SFC as well as HKEX and have been working with a number of digital asset exchanges ever since then. And I love this industry and it's very, very interesting. So that's my background. Over to you.
Thank you, Angelina, and nice to meet you everyone online. And I am Dorothy. I'm currently the Director of Hong Kong, Macao, and Cross-Border Financial Affairs at Tencent. And I'm also the Director of the Tencent Finance Academy. So we're also doing kinds of like teaching and training at Tencent. Other than that, I am also serving some industry associations like our Institute of Financial Technologies of Asia, IFTA. I am also serving on CMA, Australia, and International Association of Privacy Professionals. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Dorothy. My name is Michael Song. I am the founding co-director of the Fudan Fanhai FinTech Research Center. We try to do a lot of research and best practices related to digital assets, and specifically sort of the intersection of structured financing, taking financial techniques and applying it to applying the new innovation from digital assets. So things like asset-backed securitization and creating digital assets, tokenization of projects, and aligning stakeholder alignment, and a lot of digital finance type research. And then beyond that, I'm the chairman of Carbon Blue Innovations, which is a venture building investment platform to scale commercialization of fintech, digital finance, and blockchain, and a very strong focus on cross-border payments using digital currencies, and also the related to digital finance. We're working a lot on digitizing green bonds, for example.
Thank you. Now, everyone probably knows why I said we are very lucky today to have these three really subject matter experts to share their views with us. So let me start with Dorothy. This is an easy question for you. You must have been asked about this many times over the year. That is during the pandemic. So what do you see as the major changes in the payment industry? Have you seen any significant shifts?
Sure, thank you, King. So I guess like the impact of the COVID has like further accelerated the shift in the payment preferences, partly because of the conveniency and partly because of the advice and emphasis to avoid physical contact with the dirty cash. Okay, as we frame that where possible. So I guess like you may have read in the news that like Chinese banks have been ordered to disinfect the cash before issuing it back to the public in the effort to cope with the spread of the coronavirus. And the Chinese government state council also told the reporters that like banks across the country have been told to withdraw potentially infected cash during the pandemic time from circulations and disinfect it using either like ultraviolet or the heat treatment. So in Hong Kong, we are also seeing like a growth of citizens using e-wallets under the pandemic. So one personal experience that I could share is that like my mother, who is like who is now 73 years old, is also using digital payment now because she doesn't really want to touch the dirty cash. So taking the wet market in Hong Kong as an example. Before the pandemic, most market stores in Hong Kong do not really accept e-payment. But in late 2020, the local government had subsidized stores owners in the wet market to install contactless payment systems. And now we have more than several thousands of market stores equipped with e-payment systems. And during the CNY, we also have recorded that over several millions of sending and receiving of red tickets through our e-payment applications. So which is like double compared to the last year data. So I personally also witnessed like more and more elderly and also like less tech savvy citizens are turning to contactless payment system. So given the increasing penetrations of the e-payment adoptions in the city, we are foreseeing not only the citizens are more used to e-payment solutions, the retail stores are also moving towards to the digital transformations journey. And I believe that like they are getting ready for more revolutionary changes in the payment market.
That sounds encouraging. I believe this is probably a global trend. So we will come back to that later on, Dorothy.
Sure.
Now, Angelina, we have seen a lot of interesting news about Bitcoins, like Tesla investing 1.5 billion in the cryptocurrency. In fact, they said they would accept crypto now or at least Bitcoin, right, for buying Teslas. But just last week, I was stunned to see that a piece of digital art, a non-fungible token, was sold for $60 million equivalent, right, in Ethereum, just a couple. So do you see really a real life situation or action in Hong Kong or even in the region similar to the story that I just mentioned, the news?
I see, I guess using the best barometer is when you sit down to dinner with 10 people. When I first went into cryptocurrency, when I joined the first firm I worked with in 2018, I would say that I was in digital assets, and people go, what are digital assets? What's Bitcoin? Now, when you sit down with a group of 10 people, most of the time, everybody's discussing which firm do they actually buy Bitcoin from, what are some of the strategies, and where are they going? And this is just in the space of 2 years that you're seeing the shift where it's moving from young Bitcoin enthusiasts to actual investors getting interested in what are digital assets, how do you trade them, how do you safeguard them, how do you make sure you don't lose your 24 passwords that are necessary to keep your Trezor wallet or your Ledger wallet safe. So there's been a lot of interest, there's been a lot of uptick, and there's been a lot of press about the $69.3 million art purchase by Beeple in to that special one-time non-fungible token piece of art, which was made up of 5,000 small digital images of made by the artist. So these are the things that are actually innovating through the digital asset space. And you're seeing more and more people get into funds such as the Grayscale Fund, such as the ARK Fund, as there are more products being launched out there. And I think the real seminal moment was when Coinbase announced that they were actually going to list on the NASDAQ. Now that has since been pushed back, but nevertheless, I think now you're seeing digital assets, digital asset providers, digital asset exchanges, as well as big fund managers and private family wealth offices getting interested in a non-traditional asset such as digital assets. I think people are now finally realizing that Bitcoin is a different type of asset that is not correlated to any other type of asset. And it might be something that's good for their portfolio to sort of offset. So you're seeing institutional investors come out to say, I'd like to look more into this. I'd like some exposure, and I'd like to learn to see where this is going to go. And it's also helped to have and to see companies like Tesla, and then payments companies like Square, American Express also move into investing in Bitcoin and other digital assets as a part of their portfolio. So Hashkey has come on record to say that institutional investors are going to get more and more interested, and we believe up to 50% will be involved by the end of this year in digital assets, in some sort of involvement, either through a fund or indirectly through other asset investments. So we believe this is the dawn, and this is truly the growth area for digital assets, and they're only here to grow. So that's where we're coming from.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Because when we talk about digital assets, it could mean Bitcoin or could mean securitization of real assets. So, but even nowadays, central banks are taking a very serious look at crypto. So I have to turn to Michael, the subject matter expert. Right. So apart from creating centralized digital central bank currency. So what are the innovative use cases of so-called CBDC, central bank digital currency, beyond just digitalization of money, particularly with respect to the future of programmable money? Can you tell us more about that, Michael?
Yes, actually, this is, I think, an amazing area of innovation that we're going to see a lot of actual additional efforts. I think the leader in the world right now has to be China, with the imminent commercialization of the digital RMB, what we call the ECNY now. It's slated to be released into the wilds sometime before the Winter Olympics. So I think they've already done some very interesting use cases. In Shenzhen, in Suzhou, they had a lottery, right? So a couple million people would apply, and they gave 50,000 people lucky, like a hongbao, right? A couple hundred RMB to spend. But what was interesting was that they programmed in a expiration date, right? So if you did not use the money within a certain amount of time, it would literally expire and disappear from your wallet, right? So that was a very interesting use case because, for example, in this sort of stimulus environment during COVID, right, you want money to be put at work, right? So you could imagine putting as simple as the expiration said, this money cannot be saved. It needs to go to actually be used in productive economic activity to help the economy, right? But you can imagine other deeper use cases, right? You can say this could be not used for something else. So, for example, in the original great financial crisis in 2008, the airline industries received something on the order of $50 billion of stimulus. They took a preponderance of that, and instead of actually spending it on economic activity, they went in and did stock buybacks, right? And so, like, in fact, the airline industry since that time has put 96% of free cash flow into stock buybacks, which is a accounting trick to prop the stock, and it enriches the people who have the stock, right? The executives whose bonuses are, based off of the stock price, but does not trickle down to the bottom of the environment, to the society where the money is most needed, right? So likewise, you can program limitations in the money to say this cannot be used for stock buyback. This could not be used for, it has to be used for food stamps, right? So what that does is give the central banks a much more fine-grained fiscal control over the transmission of money into different use cases. So we're going to see a lot more of this type of innovation as things go forth, because it allows much more flexibility and fine-grained determinability for the central bank for fiscal policy.
Wow, yeah, it's really very interesting and innovative. We have goods with sold by date, but now we have money with expiry date. So, Dorothy, what do you think of such programmable features to retail payments? Can we apply some of those innovation to retail payments?
Thank you, King.
Digital payment?
I agree with Michael that with the programmable features, we do have lots of potentials in the monetary policies and also some financial aid. So taking like the government, local government as an example, we may not really need an independent system for the issuance or management of healthcare voucher in the future, but we can just keep it in the wallet because the money itself could be like having an expiry date or setting a specific use in the kind of like specific medical categories. Another good use case that I could share would be the taxation system. So if you look at the case of China, China's first blockchain electronic invoice was issued in Shenzhen in 2018, right? So it is an integration of capital flow and also invoice flow, combining the issuance of invoice with online payments and broke the barriers between the invoice applications and also the reimbursement, invoice insurance and payment. Everything could be very much seamless and more streamlined. So blockchain invoicing is beneficial for companies as it reduces the time and cost for processing through automations. And from a consumer point of view, if they really want an invoice, they do not really need to wait at the point that they have get the purchase. They could get the invoice later on the blockchain or on the system. For example, to like proof and travel expenses, they could just get the invoice later when they have time to get the reimbursement from the company. So another use case that we could see would be like in the future, if like we do have the widely use of the programmable money, so we can have like more specific informations of individual cash flow, and all these cash flow informations could be shared with the tax bureau for tax reductions or tax redemptions at just one click. Of course, with like the consent from the buyers, right, or from the data owners, and it would be helping us to remove the existing cumbersome process in the tax return. And another case that may be interesting would be on financial inclusion. So the programmable features may also provide us the ability to, for the unbanked populations, to hold or to transact without a bank account. So user may perform some basic financial functions like buy, sell, they could save, they could invest with the programmable money through a digital wallet.
Yeah, so this programmable feature is really very unique and fragile. I'd say agile. Now, Michael, I need to come back to you and ask more questions about CBDC. So what do you see as the key challenges associated with the widespread adoption of this CBDC globally in future?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be a very, very interesting next few years, right? The Bank of International Settlements has done a study and shown that 86% of central banks of the 65 surveyed are now actively researching their CBDCs. And a good fraction of them are going beyond research and actually implementing test beds and things like that. Of course, here in Hong Kong, we are doing a lot of things. In Singapore, in Switzerland, basically the most conservative financial ecosystems, they're all on board. We have Christine Lagarde from the ECB announcing within the next 2 years that their study will be done for the digital euro, and even the US now is putting things into overdrive to catch up. Okay, so what that means that in the next 3 to 5 years, okay, we're going to have dozens of CBDCs appearing on to be full commercialization. BIS says 1/5 of the population of the world will be exposed to CBDCs of their countries. Okay, within a number of years. Okay, so there's going to be a flip to the digitalization of money across the board, driven by the central banks of these governments. Now, the key issue here really is one of interoperability. Okay, because the Bank of England deploying on one blockchain and the Swiss government deploying on another blockchain, and different IT systems, and these IT systems do not talk to each other. Okay, and so therefore the next phase of development will be interoperability, CBDC interoperability, to allow the clearing and settlements of these CBDCs, and also integrated into that compliance and regulation. There's all sorts of new rules regarding stable coins also, which are the private versions of digital currencies, but they will likely need to interoperate with the CBDCs as well. So the interoperability of all these things, and also the compliance rules to allow that to happen in a cross-border way, which many have not been determined. There's the Financial Action Task Force giving recommendations on the so-called travel rule, but they don't really talk in detail about what that means. So they have some frameworks, but it remains to be seen how it will need to be implemented and how payment companies need to be compliant. So I think those are the main challenges: interoperability and regulations such that the world can now start to interoperate in this new world.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Yeah, you brought up a very important topic, that is regulation. On that one, I need to come back to you, Angelina. Yeah, we already know that CBDC will be successful because it's backed up by the central bank, right? But what about digital assets and tokenization, right, of assets? Do you think they will eventually be commercially adopted? And also, would there be a one-size-fits-all regulatory regime across the world? If not, how are we going to reach some kind of standardization?
Well, I think first of all, you're going to see more and more understanding and adoption of digital assets as time goes on. So if you look back from when Bitcoin was actually introduced to now, where you're seeing the adoption and the introduction of new coins from Ethereum to now tokenized assets and now non-fungible tokens, you're seeing basically an evolution of products and a bigger and bigger product space. And of course, with CBDC as a payment system and the use of digital assets as payments, these are all part of the whole ecosystem to create a more interesting product for commercial adoption as well as commercial adoption. So you gave the very good example of Bitcoin being used, 1.4 Bitcoin to buy the new S-Class Tesla. So, but what you're seeing too is you're seeing companies start thinking, hey, I have receivables. I need to get liquid. So what's the fastest way that I could actually get liquid? I could actually tokenize my assets. So I can get stuff that's sitting on my balance sheet and actually tokenize it. And I'm willing to pay interest. And because I have smart contracts now that are available to me, I'm going to tokenize my receivables. And then exchanges or tokenization platforms will be able to list those, and interested investors who want a ready, steady rate of return will be able to buy these tokens and get interest payments. At the same time, companies such as logistics, shipping companies will be able to get their receivables more liquid, and they'll be able to receive funds and then plow that money into further innovation. So you're going to see digital assets being used in every part of business. And that's what a lot of these big fund managers and investment funds are betting on, that the ecosystem will grow. And for example, the Tencent and the Squares of the world will start being able to use this for payment. And then exchanges will be able to tokenize. So will they achieve commercial adoption? If I were to look in the crystal ball, I would say definitely. And this will happen within the next 2 to 3 years. We'll start with smaller deals first. And this is not to affect HKEX or any major listed exchange. This will be intermediary financing to help companies grow. And then, you know what? When they're ready to list, they can go list on HKEX, NASDAQ, NYSE, and so on and so forth. So there's each part where in the ecosystem, in the financial services ecosystem, where digital assets can play a part. Now, you asked about the regulatory framework and regulatory regimes around the world. As you are aware, our friend, Mr. Ashley Alder, is the chairman of IOSCO, and we have our published regulatory regime now for virtual asset service providers. So what used to be discussed in the hallways when Bitcoin first came out and virtual assets first came out are now front row and center in terms of IOSCO discussions, or the International Organization of Securities Commissions. So you're seeing some countries just ban it outright in terms of they just don't want to deal with it, whereas other countries have taken, as we say, the proverbial bull by the horns, and Hong Kong is one of them. Singapore is another, where they've introduced regulatory regimes. Some more complicated, some less complicated, some different. So I don't think there's going to be one size fits all, but there will be definitely a framework in place, which already has been put in place. And Hong Kong has been a leader in doing this. And it's documented. There are examples. And there are applicants that are already doing this. And it's the same in Singapore with the payments and services licenses. And you're seeing actually other countries like Malaysia, they already have 3 digital asset companies that are already licensed under their regime too. So you're seeing countries in Asia that are already doing this. You're seeing other countries in Europe. But then, for example, London or the UK has said, you know what? If you don't get a license with the FCA, you are banned completely. Don't even come and operate. So each country is taking an approach to protect their own investors and to protect the investing public. So no one size fits all, but you're going to see regulation grow in this area. That is the only way to go for this industry to grow. That's just my.
Yeah. In fact, we understand SFC just recently issued a license for virtual trading as a platform.
Right.
So yeah, actually on this commercialization, I want to go back to Dorothy. You see, this digitalization of money will have an impact on the next generation of payment. And what's the evolution do you think will come next?
I think recently one of the major concern or people are really concerned about the efficiency and also the contactless. Okay, so from industry perspective, understanding the design framework such as the governance, the programmability can really help the leaders to determine which archetypes are needed and which are to avoid, where the teams can really explore the new technologies, digital competencies and ways of working can reduce the errors and weights in the long run to help the organizations to scale proven some initiative faster. And from an individual firm perspective, they could ensure backend payment and settlement system can really interoperate with the network, with the future network by running some tests and proof of concept. Internal competencies would be another concern, I believe. So a company would need to recruit and to retain the right skills. New skills will be needed in the organizations, I believe, with fintech and entrepreneurial mindset. And also one thing that fail fast, because in the payment industry, everything is changing very fast recently. And there are so many new technologies coming up. So it would be very important for an organization to equip with the fail fast culture to shorten the time to the market so that to make sure that they can keep up with the changes. Another thing, it would be business may need to ensure that senior levels from the firm also understand what is going on in the payment industry or what is the future of payment. And it may not be something that is it is not something that whether it will happen, it is something that when will it happen. So it is very much important to have the management buy-in to support and to ensure adequate resources are provided. Business should also take into account the end user benefits, including how to decrease the transaction fee, how to gather the convenience and speed and more stable investment. How such digital adoptions could also prompt customers to move away from traditional checking and saving products would be another area that the industry or incumbents or companies could explore. One last major focus that I may like to raise would be the data aspect. When we have the programmable features, the transaction data will be connected with other informations that we have to support the digital service development. So this would be a very big change in the whole data analytics aspect in the payment industry. And software is traversing traditional sector or the retail payment divides, and importantly, connecting the real economy use case with the financial services. So industry may be competing through the data assets, which will likely result in material acquisitions of data capabilities and also, of course, talents in order to have them to retain relevance in the digital economy.
Thanks. Before I get back to Michael on CBDC, because I've got a very important question for him. Angelina, do you have anything to add on this industry development?
I totally agree with what Dorothy was saying, and the Financial Services Development Council is a very important part in terms of studying what are the best ways that we should develop Hong Kong. But I believe that Hong Kong itself, and I'd say this to all the parents here, that if your kids aren't studying STEM subjects, which is science, technology, engineering, and maths, they're really going to lose out, because this is the era of growth in terms of STEM and STEM subjects. And I mean, I've been a very proponent to get women and girls and boys and girls into STEM subjects, because we need to train our young people to move into these industries. And STEM is the way to go. Science, maths, coding is going to be very important for the future, and understanding how these payment systems interrelate and interact, and how can they be further used in terms of technology. How can Hong Kong move into more of a technology background? So in the early 20s, 30s, 40s, we were very much producing textiles and things like that. Hong Kong needs to move into a technology background and retool its young people, retool its citizens to become technology focused and technology oriented, because that's the way to go for the future. And you're seeing the United States leading, you're seeing China make amazing strides. And I'm sure that's why Professor Song is in China. You're seeing smart city in China. In fact, more people have Alipay and Tencent accounts than we do in Hong Kong. Everything is cashless now in China. You cannot live without a cashless wallet. And that's where you're going to have to see adoption in Hong Kong. You're already seeing adoption in Singapore. And if you snooze, you lose. And that's why it is so important for us in Hong Kong, for the government to actually work with schools and get kids into these subjects to learn more about how can we have adoption. And it starts from the grassroots upwards into our students going to college, and then higher education in terms of educating them. So that's an area that we really, really need to focus. And then our systems ourselves. We need to upgrade our systems. We need to upgrade our technology. And I'm, with the help of Science Park, with the help of Cyberport, with the help of large corporations such as Tencent, this is going to be integral for Hong Kong and for the future of Hong Kong as we integrate into the Greater Bay Area. So much is being done around the world, especially up north. We need to be a part of that. And only to stay relevant can we be a part of that. Yeah, so I broad, but this is very, very important for us.
Yes.
And so moms and dads, make sure your kids go and study STEM.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. I think like our Tencent Finance Academy should also do more on the fintech educations, and just that we also are giving some fintech talent nurturing program to the city, and hoping that we can bring more resources from Shenzhen and the Greater Bay Area to Hong Kong, to make sure that like we are really keep up with the changes.
Financial and this area is very, very important. This literacy is very important.
Yeah. Dorothy, you have already signed yourself up for our talent amplifier program, right? Right. Yeah. So Michael, now I have a very important question for you, because with the introduction of CBDC, how are they going to affect the international monetary system? Because that dictates the whole financial market group, well, the whole world, yeah, basically.
Yeah, I've been talking about this a lot because, as an expert on the digital RMB, the major topic really is this US-China currency war kind of thing, right? Is this digital RMB a super weapon to, displace the hegemony of the US dollar, that kind of thing. I might have a different opinion on this, right, than most, right? Because it's not just about the US and China anymore. We have a world economy. It's more and more integrated as time goes by, and certainly more so as digitalization takes hold across the globe, right? And in this world, we've already said, okay, in 3 or to 5 years, there's going to be a preponderance of central banks that all have their own CBDCs, right? And they're going to want to interoperate with each other, right? And at that time, it's going to be hard for, the US, for example, let's say unilaterally, well, everything must use, the SWIFT network, so that's like saying everybody needs to use the Pony Express when everybody's already on email, right? It's just an outdated technology and mode that the world has passed by. And likewise, you have to consider, right, that now when they actually start to interoperate and have bilateral relationships, they're not going to need anything in between. They won't need to have a reserve currency in between, for example, as in the past. So what that means is that we're going to move to a multipolar world, okay? The new international monetary system will evolve into this multipolar world, one where, of course, the US and China will have their seats at the table and be dominating because of the respective dominance of the economies, but one also where much smaller players, right, the Bahamas with their sand dollar, right, can also have a seat at the table, and the new technology does not have a limitation on whether you're large or small as to be whether or not you're interoperable or not. And so I think in the end, we're going to see again, a much more multipolar world, and one where there's going to be a lot more bilateral interaction. And I think that's for the benefit of most of society.
Right. Actually, you have brought up another interesting topic, because recently BIS published a paper on multi-CBDC arrangements and the future of cross-border payments. And in that paper, they have proposed 3 conceptual approaches to cross-border CBDC. I'll try to briefly summarize what they are. The first model is private sectors to provide linkage to so-called MCBDC, multi-CBDC, similar to traditional payment systems. The other model is a centralized or decentralized clearing system as the bridge to MCBDC. The last but not least is a single MCBDC, multi-currency system with a common rulebook and governance arrangements. So which of these 3 models do you think will have a likely chance of success?
Can I choose option D, which is the fact that, yeah, option D will be all of the above, right? And I think that should be a typical standard test answer, right? Really, there's all sorts of innovation happening, all 3. Okay, so on the centralized system, centralized rubric, you see, for example, Singapore with their project Ubin. In phase 5, they're integrating digital currencies and also other types of digital securities and payments and use cases, all in a centralized exchange infrastructure. They've already gone past phase 5 and now into commercialization. So now the MAS has tossed that off into to Temasek and JP Morgan and DBS Bank. So that's an example of a centralized system, and they're making a play to be, the world's digital currency clearing and settlement, center. Okay, so that will certainly happen. And it will certainly, I think they're leading the world in that, something like that. Hong Kong notably is doing similar things, working with the Bank of Thailand and the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, and now the UAE to develop their own multi-CBDC framework, similar kind of thing. But on the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have fully decentralized systems. Right now, they're a little bit more fringe, but the idea here is that stable coins, for example, private versions of digital currencies, and potentially CBDCs, although I think from that aspect, there's a lot of regulatory constraints. But in theory, you could have a completely decentralized system we call automatic market making type technology. This is the new hot thing in what we call decentralized finance, DeFi, which has gone from basically $100 million market to over a $70 billion market over the last year. And so certainly there's going to be a lot of people who are interested in not having centralized authorities in between and being able to exchange automatically using the new DeFi technologies. Now, in between is private sector, right? And private sector to develop technologies that may be an interesting bridge between these two different worlds, right? And I'll use an example because actually Carbon Blue Innovations, my company, is doing exactly that, right? So for example, in China, there's something called the blockchain-based service network, BSN, trying to be blockchain interoperability protocol that is basically blanketed the country. On top of that, they're building what they call the UDPN, Universal Digital Payment Network, right? I think digital currency SWIFT type thing. They're already working with quite a few banks and institutions, and it's starting to look very credible. Now, the equivalent network in Africa is being developed with InterSwitch, right? InterSwitch being the SWIFT of Africa, and there's a new African Union 54. It's the largest trade bloc in the world now. After it's unionized, they're developing their payment infrastructure. In Europe, there's a similar play for CBDC interoperability. We are working with a partner which is integrating the CBDC interoperability for Bank of England and tying into the SIA network, which is 600 banks in Europe. Okay, now these pieces don't talk to each other again. So if you had a framework, okay, infrastructure frameworks that tie these places around, these pieces around, regions around, then you have corridors, right? You have Asia to Africa corridor, Africa to Europe corridor, Europe to Asia corridor. And then on top, what we're doing as a private company is integrating a single window, a universal digital wallet, right? All the compliance, regulatory pieces, KYC, et cetera, to be compliant with the travel rule eventually, so that we can do cross-border payments. And notably, maybe even additional functionality, things like FX, right? The ability to clear and settle, and also do FX between different digital currency pairs, all integrated into a single window. And then what we're doing is we want to go and take this window into emerging economies. To the last mile, whether it's the local digital wallet that is dominating, or the payment rail. And if we can give this single window to them, then we can connect the world and provide massive financial inclusion to the world. So that's something that the private sector is going to do, right? And then on top, I might add, on top of that engine of cross-border payments and liquidity provision, we can build a fintech as a service overlay, right? With things like custody, things like the key aspects of infrastructure, so that third-party services can come up. And we're looking at things like SME financing, trade finance, et cetera, on top. And we can turn these on as microservices that now allow banking functionality and new financial services and new products to spread all throughout the world, coming at a time where post-COVID, this is really the critical thing that SMEs around the world, individuals, the unbanked, 2 billion unbanked around the world need access to. So I think that is the job of the private sector. That's something central banks are not going to do, and maybe the decentralized world is not going to do. So I think bridging the gap, there's going to be an ecosystem, and it's going to be all three.
Yeah, that's a very comprehensive answer, Michael. Right. Before we open the floor for more questions, I want to ask Dorothy a very interesting question, I think, because we understand the amount of non-bank electronic payments is double that of credit card payments in China. Do you think this could be a trendsetter for other countries as digital payment becomes more popular globally? One more question, I'm a bit greedy. And also, we understand the global revenue for companies processing e-payments could be as much as $138 billion by 2024, according to insider intelligence. So do you think the digital payment market will become more fragmented because of this big pool of revenue, or in fact, the opposite, a winner takes all scenario? Yeah.
Thank you, King. This is really a challenging question. So before I respond to your second question, let's look at some, I have some statistics in hand. So I know that like around the world, we have around 2.8 billion credit cards in use worldwide. And then for the mobile phone, we have around 2.3 billion of smartphone users. So from this data, we know that like it is very important today to stay ahead of the game to serving your customer needs. And how do you really help them to have a streamlined, smooth, or convenient shopping experience, including the payment part. So in the old days, it is like for the payment part, it is like a must-have journey. But now there are, with the technology, it also brings us a lot of potentials in streamlining the payment process so as to make them more happy when they are spending the money. So for this, we can expect that more and more merchants are really providing some frictionless payment in the future, which means that like the payment will be totally seamless. You cannot really feel like you have spent your money. And it also helps us to remove the pain points such as handling cash, entering the pins, or touching with the physical cards. And the acceleration is still, and then at least in part to the fact that more consumers are also demanding some contactless payments, right? So for example, one changes that we are seeing in the payment journey is the voice activated payment. The voice activated payment is gaining the momentum. And we know that like more than 75% of the iPhone users are using Siri. And for Android owners, they also have other tools to communicating with the virtual assistants on their smartphone. Sort of like AI has an important advance in other aspects in life, but its applications in payment is just the beginning. Voice-enabled payments are exactly like what it sounds like. We are enabling transactions using one's voice, right? So it could be used to confirm transactions, or such as like food delivery providers are also using some voice enabled payment methods. We are also seeing some merchants have integrated the purchasing model that are activated by voice. For example, like Amazon Alexa, we know that like they allow users to make online purchase through their Amazon accounts, very much like clicking a buy now button. But now you can just use your voice to tell them you need to done the purchase, and then they will use Amazon will use the credit cards or debit cards or other online methods that are filed in their accounts to automatically make the purchase. So we are expecting that we will be seeing a deeper integration with mobile or banking apps, credit card apps, e-commerce business, and also improved security measures with all these new technology will be foreseen in the near future. And with all this payment, usually we'll be experiencing a more interactive but automated or concierge experience, as I would describe. So it is not just a payment surface, but it is more like a personal assistant that could help you to make the payment more streamlined. And such technology will go further than just simply letting people to make payment using voice technology, but they will be also able to communicate with financial institutions, handling more complicated tasks like issuing invoice and other financial services. So one thing that will, from all these case studies and stats, we can see that like there is a trend towards the eventually invisible payment, which will be removing all indications that a payment is actually taking place. And the Internet of Things will also be helping us that maybe in the future, we do not really need a device to do the payment. You can do your payment with your iris, with your retinal scan, with your voice, with your facial scans. That will be enough to trigger a payment and transactions. So these frictionless and contactless payment moving towards the invisible status and ability to pay with a mobile wallet, to pay with your watch, to pay with, or even pay with your voice are becoming a norm will become a norm in the city. So it is kind of like hard to predict whether the winners will take it all or what. But what we can foresee is that there are lots of technological changes in the payment market. Lots of new third-party service provider will be joining. There will be much more innovative and creative process of the payment. And I believe like invisible payments will be dominating the market in the future, and those will be the winners in the future.
Wow, very
I hope
interesting.
that I have resolved your concern.
Yeah, invisible payments. I like that term. That means we'll be spending more. Right.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, unconsciously. Okay, I've got questions from the floor. I think this question actually so dovetails to what we've just been discussing. That's technology, the application of technology. So I'll welcome all the speakers to answer this. So the question is, compared to developed economies, whether emerging economies will have greater chance of modernizing economy with the help of technology and digitalization, as these economies have new generations which are more tech ready or savvy. So maybe I'll ask Michael first.
Yeah, so this is the old adage, the leapfrogging, right? I mean, if you have, for example, in the United States, the banking system and the credit card systems was so incumbent that I think it was laggard when we are now moving to this new world of digital payments, right? So because of that, infrastructure was there. In new developing economies, you have no such restriction. Anybody with a mobile wallet, in fact, you have a need, right? Because the traditional international monetary system and the traditional banking system, it does not exist, and you do not have access. So there is a need to be able to do that. Plus, the new technology is so much better that it's much more fleet of foot. And I think that happened in China, and you see now that China has 96% of mobile payments, by the duopoly, and it's basically gone cashless. And you're going to see that again in places like Africa and ASEAN in this next phase, where they don't have access to things, and now they will be able to do things directly through their mobile phone, and eventually, if Dorothy has her way, through their voice, right?
Yeah, so Dorothy, Tencent was the pioneer in China. So are you applying the same kind of approach to other emerging markets?
I think I agree with Michael that for China, we do have a very good success of cashless economy development in the very early days. And most of the people, when I visit Shenzhen, I do not really need to take cash. I still have some renminbi in my drawers, but I never have a chance to use that because no place in Shenzhen is taking those fiat money nowadays. So regarding to Kang's questions, I do not have a good capacity to say whether we really have some plans on other economies, but I believe that for economies that there is a need, then there will be business who are fulfilling the needs.
I mean, what you're seeing countries that have a master plan, and China really had a master plan to move into information technology. So even for my parent company, it first started out in the automobile industry parts. And then now it's morphed into a huge financial conglomerate that actually is working in blockchain. So Wanshang Blockchain is one of the largest blockchain providers and is involved also in CBDC. So it's where there's a master blueprint. And if you look at the country of Israel, for example, Israel is surrounded by all of the Muslim countries around. They need to survive. So how are they going to remake themselves? They're going to keep in the forefront of technology and in the forefront of modernization. And in fact, a lot of the changes have actually been coming out of payment systems as well as technology, have been coming out of Israel as well as China. So when you get a country that makes a decision, and maybe it's behind in the beginning, but when they really make a decision that this is what we want to do, then they're going to, as Michael said, leapfrog and make the right decisions to actually move forward, sometimes faster than countries that are already developed. You're seeing the same with Singapore. You're seeing a lot of investment go into Singapore now, and they're attracting a lot of players in the digital asset space. And with Project Ubin, which Michael brought up, you've got the full faith and backing of Singapore Inc. behind this, with the money of Temasek and with the banking facilities of DBS to actually get into digital assets. And in fact, DBS has been the first bank to be allowed to actually move into digital assets and start a digital assets exchange. That is unheard of in a lot of countries. And it's because they have to vault forward and try something very different to keep ahead.
Talk about digital assets. We have a question that is about the speculative nature of some of these virtual assets. So how do you make the distinction whether these are here for the long term and it's good for the financial market or just for speculation? Any wisdom comment on that?
For me, if you don't understand the product, you shouldn't be investing. If you get into a product, be it digital assets or be it gold or be it buying HCAC shares, you should definitely know what the product it is that you're getting into. So right now, digital assets are roughly $8 trillion product. Did you know the equities products are over 67.5 trillion in assets? That's as of 2020, and that's a survey that I'm just quoting from that was in our white paper. So digital assets have a long way to grow. We're at 1 trillion now. I think we're gonna go, it's gonna take a few years, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth in digital assets. But it's speculative in that if you don't understand it and you don't keep it properly, you could lose everything. And it depends on what your entry price is for any of these assets. So I would, as an ex-regulator, I would tell anybody getting into the digital asset space, learn, go and study about it first before you get into this product, and always go to a licensed or a reputable provider of digital assets, and make sure that you find out who are the right people. There have been scams actually in the newspaper recently in Hong Kong where people have been robbed of cash whilst making changes, exchanging for digital assets. That's an area that you just need to be very careful. And it's no different than buying FX. It's no different than buying the local London gold than before. So investors need to be aware, and there needs to be proper investor education before they buy into funds or buy into specific digital assets. So I would really, really caution people, make sure you know what you're getting into before you get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know we're running out of time, but I have a question for Michael, and both Angelina and Dorothy feel free to comment. It seems that the Lion Rock project, that's the project between Hong Kong MA and the Thailand Central Bank. The focus more on wholesale. Oh, sorry, this is the Lion Rock. Yeah, that's right. That's the Hong Kong MA one. And then the DCEP or ECNY works more on retail application. So we were kind of ECNY, ECNH retail applications be tested within selected use in Hong Kong. So, Michael,
what's the question? Yeah.
The question is whether ECNY would, some kind of retail application of that, or in this case, ECNH, offshore renminbi, will be tested in Hong Kong with selected users.
Yes, I think the PBOC has bing very tight-lipped about the implementation plans. I mean, what has been announced by Yi Gang and also by Mu Tan-Sun, who's the head of the Digital Currency Institute, has been, yes, it's just to be a replacement of the M0, i.e. cash, okay? And it will, the initial focus will just be limited to the mainland, right? But of course, you can read between the lines. Right now that it's, since its announcement by the fourth plenary sessions in October of 2019, it went into limited test beds in 4 cities in the spring, and now has been, blanketing the country in all the most important economic areas. Importantly, the Greater Bay Area, okay? And the Greater Bay Area, of course, includes Macau and Hong Kong. So, I think an initial interest will be to allow Chinese tourists, for example, to be able to cross borders and to be able to conduct transactions. And I think that it's not announced, but I wouldn't doubt that those kind of testing is going to happen, and that will be the first foray into that. Also, with respect to the Olympics, as I mentioned, I believe that they don't explicitly say so, okay, but I think that they're quite obvious that there's going to be gearing up of digital currency tests in preparation for that. And that, of course, involves a lot of foreign athletes who come into the country. And so I think there'll be limited cases where, for retail use, that they will allow some of this activity to be tested. And of course, when that, the thing that the Chinese government is good at is what we call a lean methodology, A/B testing. So they're testing all sorts of use cases, and the things that work well, they start to move up into more rigorous stress testing. And so as soon as they feel comfortable that this is viable, and that there's no pushback and there's no problems, they're going to release that more and more use cases and also functionality in the short term. So I think really we're going to see a huge implementation that will come very quickly over the next few years.
Thanks. Actually, we've got it spot on, so right on the dot. On that note, I really want to thank our speakers for their very insightful sharing, and also all our friends and audience from all over the world attending this webinar. So we look forward to seeing you all again in not too distant future.
And I think say on behalf of the three of us that we really appreciate you, Dr. Chau, for being our moderator and for leading a great conversation.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you, King. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.